Hey everyone, this is Duke with a configuration video for the FPV class. Um, we have changed hardware a couple of different times in class over the course of the past few semesters, and so some of you were working on this and I saw some mistakes being made because I was trying to use the video from last time, but we're making a new video. And this hardware seemed to be pretty good so far, so we might use it for a few semesters, which means it's definitely more worth it to make a video as well. Anyways, I'm going to try to make this brief but thorough. So we're going to go over the initial Betaflight configuration of our quadcopter. You can see here I have a little quadcopter demo board thing over here. And hopefully this video turns out okay with the side-by-side. Thought that might be helpful in watching what I'm doing and watching the board a little bit as well. Okay, so a couple prerequisites for this video to work. You need to have the Betaflight configurator installed. Okay, you also need to have your receiver and transmitter bound together. Okay, I'm not going to cover binding in this video. You'll need to do that whenever uh, whenever you do that on your own. You want to use your own resources for that, or you can use my videos for that. I have some Express LRS stuff here. If you're using a different protocol, then you want to either ask me about that separately or find your own resources. Get your transmitter receiver bound before you start this process. Okay. These other steps here we'll go through. You also want to have your VTX table. Okay. And you can get that in the moment, of course. It's just online, but you can have that ready as well. I think that's all we need to have ready. Okay, so basically we want to have your quad, of course, wired up and stuff like we've been doing in class. I have a small battery here, one of the batteries, that we're going to fly with. I have a smoke stopper here, not necessarily because I need to smoke stop this, I've already tested it, but it's easier for me to turn it on and off, especially during a video with the smoke stopper and just leave the battery plugged in. So you will need a battery as well as your drone, which is this is simulating your drone right now, okay? Your transmitter, your computer, USB cable. You can also get your FPV goggles. Okay, I'm just going to use these for a demo and have these out so you can test to make sure that the camera is broadcasting, or the VTX is broadcasting the camera's video feed, and you have on-screen display and all that good stuff. So let's check it out. All right, so I'm going to open up Betaflight Configurator here. Make sure this is recording correctly. Okay, awesome. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. I apologize. I know it's recording my screen. It's kind of annoying. Oh, go ahead and try that. All right, so I have latest configurator 10.10.0, which if you don't have that, you might need to update, or you can try using the web version. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and plug the flight controller into the computer via USB. So it's not powered via battery right now. It's just battery's there, but it's not powered via battery. Okay, and so you'll see, there's my radio. You'll see when you plug it in, like you did the first time you plugged in the flight controller before we soldered on it, you should be able to connect to Betaflight. And you can see your little quadcopter here when we move it around. It wiggles on screen and stuff, and we have a target up here, SpeedyB F405 Mini. Okay, that's important. All right, and we're going to, first step is now that we have it connected, connecting OK, go back over here. We're going to update our flight control to Betaflight 4.4 firmware, or the latest stable release. So it's been a little while since I wrote this description in this assignment. There's a new release, I believe. We'll check in the configurator real quick. So we're going to configurator. We're going to disconnect and just hit update firmware. And we should get the page like this. Okay, you can try auto detecting your board, and it might work, it might not. Either way, you know which board you have, SpeedyB F405 Mini, and 4.5.1 is the latest stable release. If you enable expert mode, you'll see these other sliders here. If you don't have it enabled, it'll just look like this. You can click auto detect and do kind of the same thing. So either way is fine. All right, once you have that, I'll detect one more time. Once you have that selected, you should see this button down here, load firmware online, kind of turn yellow, so you can click on it. Don't worry about any of this extra stuff here. The defaults are fine for what we're going to do. This is how you build different features into the firmware that you may or may not need, or remove features you don't need if you have a flight controller that can't fit all the features, for example. But ours defaults is just fine. So we're going to hit load firmware. It's going to load the firmware online. It's going to build it for us online, and then basically download it. And then we're going to hit flash firmware. Okay, let's see. It's going to say wipe out all settings, restore and recommend saving a backup before continuing. Okay, so if you have set up things already, then you would want to create a backup. If you haven't set anything up, then there's not really much to back up. You already took a CLI diff of the flight controller from the factory in class. So I'll go through this process just to show you here. I did set up a few things on this ahead of time, so I might as well do this. We'll go ahead and save that. Okay, great. And then if this happens, no response from the bootloader, programming failed. Okay, that can sometimes happen. Just depends on the flight controller sometimes or the processor going through. What we need to do is get the flight controller into what's called DFU mode, direct firmware upload or update mode. Okay, to do that, we'll have to use a button on the flight controller. So let's go ahead and unplug the flight controller from our computer physically, unplug the USB port. Okay, and there's a button here. Let's see, I think it's on this side. Yeah, right here, where my finger's at. There's a button on the bottom of the board. I'm going to press that button while I plug it into the computer. Okay, and it'll boot the board up, but not in the normal way. It'll boot it up in DFU mode. So we'll see DFU right here, STM32 bootloader, and now we should be able to update the firmware. We're going to have to, we'll just load it one more time online, and then we'll flash the firmware. Okay, so we had it in the special mode because that's what it needs to be in to flash the firmware. Sometimes it'll go in that mode, automatically via the software triggering that. Sometimes you have to press the button, and to press the button where you plug the USB port in to get it to go into DFU mode. So we hit flash firmware, okay, and it should get a little erasing thing down here. And then once it finishes erasing, it should do a green progress bar of flashing. Like some interlude music. Make sure this is recording still. Okay, good. Get our flashing here. We're just updating the latest release of Betaflight since they always have new fixes and changes and things that could be beneficial and could fix problems that were present in past releases. So if you're going to start fresh with a build, you might as well start with the newest firmware. I think that's, generally speaking, a good idea. And if you get programming successful down here, then that's great. You have successfully flashed your flight controller to the newest version of Betaflight. So we have done this. That was our configurator. We have done this. Okay, now we're going to go into step 3. Let's go ahead and connect to our flight controller now. And you will get a pop-up like this. Warning, accelerometer is enabled but not calibrated. That's okay. Hit close. We're going to calibrate that now. Okay, so calibrate the accelerometer and orient the accelerometer to the gyroscope. Okay, so the accelerometer is what measures basically gravity, acceleration. And so if we want to use angle mode on our quadcopter and have it self-level, it needs to know where down is so it can know how to keep itself upright. Well, with our quad flat on the table, and I'm just going to have mine right here, we're going to hit this button, Calibrate Accelerometer. It'll take a few seconds, and the quad will kind of level out on screen if it was a little bit off. And you should do this while your drone is sitting flat on the table, not tilted or anything like that, just flat on its feet there, or arms, I guess you could say, and calibrate the accelerometer there. All right, so now if I tilt it around, we should get appropriate movement. Okay, my flight controller is oriented kind of to the side. Well, you're seeing the video in a different orientation, but you should get movement that corresponds to how you're actually moving the quad. If you don't, then we'll look at that in just a second. Okay, but that's all we need to do on this page. Let's go ahead and go over to the configuration page. Let's do that first. Okay, the board and sensor alignment here. Okay, this should be good with the defaults, as long as you mounted your flight controller right side up and facing the kind of normal direction for how we built it in class. If for some reason you need to mount your flight controller backwards or sideways or something like that, you can adjust how many degrees it's off from its intended center here, which will then affect how it moves when you actually move the quad in here. Okay. The gyro accel and first gyro, that's typically set by the firmware for the specific board, so you shouldn't have to change these ones here, at least in my experience. But you might have to adjust roll, pitch, and yaw if you mounted the flight controller in a different configuration other than standard. Okay. Let's go back to ports real quick. We'll kind of just go down the row here. So in ports, we're going to be configuring basically the serial ports for our flight controller to be able to talk to the different devices we've connected. One of those being a receiver. We also have a video transmitter as well. Okay. And the way these ports work is we have these things called UARTs, Universal Asynchronous Receive and Transmit. And so we have, in this case, 6 different UART ports on this flight controller. And what we want to do not mess with this first one. Okay, that's typically your USB connection. If you screw that up, you have to reflash the flight controller. So don't do that. But we have these other ones here, and typically these will correspond to the T and R pads on your flight controller. So like T1R1 would be UART1. T2R2 would be UART2. So whatever device you wired to those specific pads, you would configure here with whatever it's going to be. So in our case, we wired our receiver. If we look at the wiring diagram, or if you just look at your flight controller itself, it's wired to the T2 R2 pads as well as power and ground, but T2 and R2 are what we're focused on here. And so we're going to turn serial RX on here because that is our serial receiver wired to T2 and R2, which is UART2. Okay, so that's one port we'll turn on. And the other one we'll turn on is our video transmitter. Okay, our video transmitter is wired just to a T pad. Let's see. Let me see if I can zoom in here. Let me move this over a little bit smaller. There we go. Maybe. Sorry. You should all know by now, I guess, that Duke doesn't do a ton of video editing, but all right. Let's see if we can zoom in enough to see that. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it or not. But, well, if you were to look back here, we have our smart audio wired to T2, sorry, T1, okay, T1 here, and that's going to control our smart audio, basically tell our video transmitter to change channels, change power, things like that, okay, and that is what we want to set up there. So I'll go over to Betaflight, and so on our UART1 here, we want to set this over in peripherals. We want to set this to smart audio, TBS smart audio. Okay, so that one there, TBS smart audio. So we have TBS smart audio on T1, our receiver on T2 and R2. Okay, and then this one is turned on by default because I think this one, if I'm not mistaken, if you remember in class I told you can use an app to connect to this flight controller instead of your computer USB cable. So I believe this to be the Bluetooth communication chip on the flight controller. So you can connect to your flight controller with the app and configure it via this UART here. So don't turn that one off or else the Bluetooth settings will probably not work. Okay. We just have our video transmitter here, our receiver on 2, nothing on 3, 4 is turned on by default, but if it's not, you can turn it on. 5 is off and 6 is off. Once you've done that, you're going to hit save and reboot. And now we've told our flight controller which devices to communicate with on which ports. Okay. And as long as you go back to this page and everything is as you left it, then you should be in good shape. If you set something that's not like possible or not set up correctly, it will often basically undo your changes once you hit save and reboot. Kind of its way of telling you, hey, that's not going to work. Okay. All right, so we have our setup page done, our ports page done. Configuration is next. Okay. This is mostly going to be default stuff, but there's some things we can add in here. I'm going to check, make sure that's set there. Okay. You can put a name for your craft in. Okay, so I can put Duke or something like that if I want to, or your pilot name. You can use those later on your on-screen display to show, in the video feed who's flying or what aircraft you're flying. So if you had multiple drones, you could name each one, and then if you're looking back at video footage, you could see which one was which from the video footage, perhaps. Okay. Excuse me. Down here we have FPV camera angle. I'm not actually sure what this tab is supposed to do. I don't know what that's for. I should look into that. But here are the arming, maximum arm angle in degrees. Okay, this allows us to arm the drone or turn the motors on at up to 25 degrees from perfectly flat. That's not a very large angle. And what this means is if you flying your drone around and you kind of land in the field and your drone's a little bit tilted or something like that, and it's more than 25 degrees tilted from perfectly flat, then you won't be able to arm it, which is kind of a bummer. So what I recommend is you go ahead and change this to 180 degrees, which means it might tell us over here. There we go. Setting to 180 will effectively disable the check. That way you can arm the drone no matter which direction it's facing or how much it's tilted, which can sometimes help you get the drone back off the ground after you crash. And sometimes you still can't, but it helps a lot more than having it at 25 degrees. Okay. Other features, we're going to leave these as is. That is, unless of course you're going to be using a GPS. We're not using LED strip, but we can just leave that on. That's fine. And we are using OSD, so we will leave that on as well. We also want air mode on. Okay, let's go over to the right hand side. We already talked about board and sensor alignment. We don't need to trim the accelerometer typically. Okay, D-shot beacon configuration. So this will help in some cases to find your quad when it's laying in the field in some grass and you can't really see it right off the bat. What happens here is if you lose connection to your receiver, and this is checked, okay, it will basically use the motors as a beeper and just kind of beep, 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 so you can find the drone a little bit easier, okay. This one here will do the same thing, but you can flip a switch on your transmitter to make the motors beep. So you still have connection in this case, and you're just trying to find it. And you can flip that a switch on your transmitter that you set up later and beep your motors. This top one will just beep the motors if it loses connection to your transmitter. Say it's lost in the field over a little bit of a hill or something, and you lose line of sight with the quad on the ground, and it's just beeping so you can find it. So I'd recommend trying both those. If you don't really like them, you can turn them off later. The beacon tone just makes different types of sounds from the motor, so you have to test that yourself and see which one you like or don't like. I'll just leave it on the default for now. Beeper configuration, we have these different beeps that happen at different times. Now, I think you just leave them all at defaults is going to be fine. You might want to change them if that's up to you. Some of these, I don't know, maybe things you like, maybe things you don't like. It's totally up to you. We'll leave them all on defaults for now. Just leave them all on, and that'll be fine. We hit save and reboot. There we go. So now we've down the power and battery tab. Okay, we're going to leave this basically as is. We're not going to mess with anything here. You can do some calibrations to get more accurate measurements of amperage and things like that when you're flying. Though typically the defaults work well for cell voltage. That's kind of the most important thing, not kill your battery, but you can set up other calibrations here if you'd like. Okay, amperage and things like that. Let's go on to failsafe. Failsafe. The default failsafe for Betaflight is a safe one, right? That's good. And basically what happens is the aircraft, if you lose link with the aircraft in the air, it will just drop. Okay, and that's pretty much what you want it to do. These don't have GPS, at least most of them don't. And so it can't fly back to home. It can't do any of that cool special stuff because it doesn't have that ability. So the safest thing for it to do is just fall on the ground wherever it is, and you got to go find it, which is a pain, but at least you didn't hurt anybody or anything like that by having a flyaway drone or cause any property damage. Now, if you have a GPS set up or something like that, you may want to set up something like a GPS rescue. Okay, has it actually fly back to home and land near you. Okay, and that can be pretty cool. We're not using GPS in the class, so I'm not going to go through the setup of that. Though some of you might have a GPS and might set it up on your own, that's totally fine. Okay, but the failsafe has a couple different stages. Okay, and so you can set these stages appropriately, but again, the defaults will work fine for what we want to do. Okay, so we're just going to save and reboot. We go down to, let's jump back to the assignment for a second. Okay, so we have calibrated, we've configured the ports for the RX and VTX. That was the ports page. We're going to go to the receiver in just a minute here. So let's go over to that. Let's see, receiver. Okay, receiver here, we want to set it up to be a serial via UART receiver. Okay, let's work there. We'll set this to CRSF. Okay, and once our aircraft is bound up, so the transmitter receiver are bound, once I move my stick around, we see the aircraft is receiving those signals. Okay, so that's essentially all we really need to do on this page, at least for right now, to the kind of initial setup. So if that's working, then great. If it's not working, make sure it's set to serial, CRSF, and make sure you have your port turned on with your serial RX here. Okay, so there's our receiver setup. Let's save that. Let's jump back here to the, let's see where we're at here. Okay, if using ELRS, correctly set up RX link. Oops, I'm sorry, this node is supposed to be up here with the receiver, not with the VTX. But we'll go ahead and do this now. RX link. Okay. This is just Express LRS specific. If you're using something else, then you can kind of skip ahead in the video here. We're going to go to presets. And these are basically just bundles of settings that you can apply all at once. So in this case, you want to find the update rate you're using with your Express LRS hardware. In my case, it's set on 150 right now. Okay, so if you look at this, let's see if that's right side up. Yeah. Well, you're set on, I'm on 150, so I'm going to use the 150 hertz update rate preset. So go over here in Betaflight, click on this one. I'll click the drop down here, and there are some settings. So you want to put these into your, or choose the settings that most apply to your drone. In this case, I'm going to find freestyle. I have a serial RX, which all of you will have a serial RX as well if you have Express LRS. Voltage readings, I like to get single cell values. That's up to you. Just basically, you can either get a value of a single cell in your battery or get the value voltage-wise of the whole pack. Okay, I don't want to use cinematic rates, so that's fine. Once you've made your selections, you want to hit pick, and you say save and reboot. It's going to do this little loading bar, reboot your flight controller, you reconnect, and you're back to where you were at when you started. Okay, so that is our correctly set up RX portion here. Sliders on stick movement, and we applied the preset here. I need to move that again. So I apologize. I need to move that up here under number 5. And now we're going to go to this step 6, correctly set up VTX table on product page. So if we go to the product page here, see if we can find where this is. I'm trying to remember where it was at on the product page. Okay, here's the VTX table. Okay, and then you can download it here, which I'll show you in just a second. Basically what this is helping the flight controller know is when you say, I want to go to channel R3, what is the actual frequency, as in radio frequency of that channel for this VTX. And analog VTXs differ in this. That's why you have to find the table for your specific VTX. You're using the MO3 this semester, so this table is what you'll be putting into Betaflight essentially in order for the flight controller to be able to talk to the video transmitter. So if you click here to download it, okay, it's going to say here's the CLI for the VTX, and we say, okay, which one do we have? You guys have the MO3. I don't recall if it's the MO3 V1.1 or 1.0, and unfortunately my VTX up here is actually a slightly different one, so I can't look and check that right now. But you want to find the one for whatever you have, 1.1 or 1.0, okay? And it shows you how to kind of see that here, 1.1, 1.0 or 1.1. And once you click on that, it will download a text file. Okay, mine looks like this for my VTX. It just has a bunch of text, but it has those channels, you know, A, B, E, F, R. It has the frequencies right here, and so this way we can put this into our flight controller, and it will know how to talk to the video transmitter. So let's go back over here. Okay, correctly set up the VTX via the VTX table. Okay, so we're going to take our VTX table, so this thing here, and once you download it and open it, it'll look like this, just a text file. I'm going to go Control A, select all of it, Control C, copy that. We're going to go over to the CLI interface down here, and we're going to click in here and hit Control V, and it will just say save, but it would actually put all the text in there. And once you say save to file, or sorry, you just press enter, not save to file, press enter, it will put all that stuff in there. You saw it for a second, and then it will reboot. Okay. And now if we go into our video transmitter tab down here, okay, we'll see a table like this. If you don't see this table, then something didn't work. Okay, but that's our VTX table there. Now to test it, we'll need to power up with battery power and stuff, so we'll do that in a second. Right now you can see my device ready, false, because I'm only powered via USB right now, so the VTX doesn't power up on USB. It only powers up with battery power. So we'll do that in a second. Okay, let's go back over here. All right, so we got our VTX set up. We're going to test that, and then we'll move on to motor direction. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to disconnect here, unplug my demo drone here physically from the computer, and then going to power up with a battery power. Okay. You notice I hadn't had it powered up until this point because video transmitters will get quite warm and even hot to the point of shutting off if you just leave them powered without any airflow. You really need to keep them cool or be in the air flying. Okay? I don't have a little fan, so I just keep mine unpowered unless I need to. I'm going to plug back into the computer now, and we're going to go back to our video transmitter tab. We should see, no, it still says false. That's interesting. Let's try changing one of these channels and see if that works. Race band. Let's try channel 1, power 25. Let's try saving there. Okay, it's still not saying it's ready. Let's try pasting let's try pasting that table back in here again and reboot it that way. Come on, video transmitter. Still not working correctly. That's strange. TBS Smart Audio. Let's see if it's broadcasting in the goggles. You know what? I wonder if, look at this for a second here. No, it's soldered to the T-pad. All right, I'm going to pause the recording. Let me troubleshoot for a second. All right, I'm back. That was strange. I'm not getting a device ready signal here, but I am getting video feed on my goggles. And so I'm not really sure what's going on there. We'll keep going and continue to troubleshoot as we go. But you can see let's see here. See the video feed there from the camera. All right. So we're going to continue on to our motor testing. Okay. Motor direction, position, ESC protocol type. Okay. This is going to require a battery as well. So good thing we're already plugged in. We want to kind of do this a little bit quick so our VTX doesn't overheat. All right. So to do this, the first thing you want to do is disconnect from Betaflight, on the computer side. And you can close Betaflight even if you want to. Okay. I'm going to leave it plugged into the computer via USB, and we're going to open up a Chrome-based browser and go to this web app called ESC Configurator. Okay. We're going to connect here, and then we're going to, if we haven't plugged our battery in yet, plug it in at this point, and then hit Read Settings. And what we're doing now is we're using the flight controller as a pass-through to basically program the ESC via this pass-through of the flight controller. Okay, now my ESCs are already flashed, but yours will say something like BL Heli right here. They won't say Blue Jay. They'll say BL Heli. Okay, and they'll have a version number. And what you want to do is you want to make sure you get all 4 ESCs recognized, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you're going to say flash all ESCs. It's going to take you to this page here. You're going to select Blue Jay, not BL Heli S. Okay. You're going to leave this version whatever it was, because that's what the version of the ESC is. You don't need to change that. Okay, you don't change that. Leave that whatever it was, which it should be the same as it is on screen for me as well. Okay, and then you can select version, latest version 20.0.21.0 at the time of recording this, and then the PWM frequency here. You can choose 48 as a good frequency to go with for what we're doing, to the best of my knowledge, anyways. Okay, once you've done that, okay, you'll hit flash, and it will flash all of your ESCs. Now I'm not going to do that because I already did flash my ESCs. You can see here they all say Blue Jay 0210 48 kilohertz, and they all are the same firmware there. Okay. If you're interested at this point, you can also open the melody editor and make your ESC motor combo play a little sound when you turn it on. So little songs and things. I'd recommend don't pick a really long one because it can be annoying when you're trying to, every time you turn the drone on, it has to play this before you can fly. But don't, just choose one that you like, or just choose the default is fine too. Let's try the ABBA one. That one's pretty long. Let's see. I don't know a lot of these. There's many more than I thought there were last time. Let's just do Star Wars. There we go. You can test it out on your computer, or you can just accept it and then write melodies, and it will save that to your ESCs. Once it comes back and is not grayed out anymore, it should have written that. Okay, so hit close. And now we can go ahead and disconnect here from the ESC configurator. You'll hear the tones. I don't know if you can hear that via my mic or not, but it's playing the Star Wars theme song now. Okay. Once that's done, I'm going to let my VTX cool off for a little bit. Let's turn the battery power off there. I'm going to close the ESC configurator. I'm going to go back into Betaflight. Okay, it's always a good idea to reboot if you're having trouble, but as long as it pops up here, COM10, we should be able to connect to it. Okay, I'll go look at the motors tab for a second before we power the battery back up. The motors tab is right here. All right. So there are two different configurations you can fly a quadcopter in typically. There are what's called props in, where the props rotate in towards the nose of the aircraft and in towards the tail of the aircraft. Or there is props out, which basically is the opposite. The props rotate away from the nose of the aircraft and away from the tail of the aircraft. This is the aircraft's front. Okay. And the reason why you can do this, people have different preferences. I believe there's some slight advantages to props out, especially when you're flying FPV, as this can fling debris and things away from your camera. Since we have kind of those jacket things on the side of our quad, we don't have to worry as much about all the grass clippings and stuff getting flung into our electronics, which is where they will get flung if you're flying props out. But either way, it's up to you however you want to do it. But just realize whichever way you're going to go, you got to remember that so you can put your props on the right way and get your motor spinning the right way, etc., etc. Okay, I'm going to set this up as if it were props out, since that's how I fly FPV quads typically. Okay, and so what we're going to do is we're going to set it to motor directions reversed first of all. Okay, we're then going to power motors up. So I'm going to power this up again. Okay. We get our little Star Wars song, and it's actually longer than I thought, so it's already kind of a pain with setup to listen to it every single time, but that's okay. All right, and once we have that changed there, we hit save and reboot. Okay, reboot, we'll go back to the motors tab, and you see these buttons have been ungrayed out, I guess you would say. So we'll say reorder motors, and this little wizard thing's going to pop up. Slide this over, you press start. Okay. I only have one motor set up here, so it's not going to be as great of a demo. I didn't want to use all four motors just for the demo board. But this is the front of your quad, and whichever motor is spinning at this point, you're just going to click on it. So let's just say it's my front left motor. So I click on it, and then it's going to spin a different motor. And you go, okay, I'm going to spin the rear right motor. That's the one that's spinning right now. I'm going to click on it. Then it will spin the front right motor, for example. And you click on it, you say that's the one that's spinning. And you go through that until you get all the motors spinning in the positions that they're supposed to be. And what this does is it helps the flight controller know, hey, when I send a signal to this specific ESC, that ESC is controlling a motor that is in the front right of my quad or the rear left of my quad or whatever it is. So once you get that going, then you just click until they're in the correct positions, and then you hit save. Okay, and it'll reboot. And the second half of this is the motor direction spin right here. Okay, so this, I would just do the wizard if I were you. Okay, the wizard here is going to start and spin all the motors at the same time. Okay, big note here, just like it says, make sure you don't have any props on. We don't ever need props until we're ready to actually fly these things, and we're not ready yet. You'll hit start spin motors, okay, and your motor should start to spin like this one here, except all four of them will spin. Okay, you want to just take your finger, or you can put some tape on the motors ahead of time and see which way the tape kind of spins, and feel the motor. Which way is it spinning? Is it spinning the right direction like in the diagram, or is it spinning the wrong direction? Okay, there's only two directions it can spin, clockwise or counterclockwise. If it's spinning the right direction, leave it alone. If it's spinning the wrong direction, then you just click on the number that corresponds with the motor that's spinning the wrong way. And the motor should stop temporarily and then start spinning the other direction. Okay. Once you've done that with all four motors that are all spinning the right direction, okay, then you just hit close. Okay. And the motors should be set to spin that direction. So once again, after you've done the reordering motors, okay, this one here where we click on which one's in which position, okay, Then you're going to go to motor direction, same thing, use the wizard, you hit start spin motors and you change the motor direction accordingly. So if I need to change one, I can change it with a button like that, and then I'll save that, close it, okay? And your motors should be spinning the right direction. That's important because our props will need to go on the appropriate motors that are spinning the right direction for their position on the quadcopter. Okay. After you've set that up, you're going to go down here to the ESC motor features. We're going to turn bidirectional D-shot on. Okay, agree, and then save and reboot. Okay, we're going to go back to motors. And this has stayed on, which is good because we do have the BlueJ firmware now. BlueJ is bidirectional compatible. BLHeli-S is not. And it did change this to D-shot 300 instead of 600. That's okay. It must not support 600 on BlueJ. I'm not sure, but it won't let you change that to 600. I've tried a couple times. Okay, that's all you need to do on this page. The right-hand side over here is if you want to manually spin the motors. So if I wanted to spin one up, let's see, I can't remember which one that was. There we go. Oh, it tripped my smoke stopper. Whoops. Okay, but as you spin the motors up with the sliders, it will spin the motor one at a time manually, and you can change things that way as well if you need to, or test things out that way. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn this off so we don't have our VTX overheating actually. We've done our motor direction, position, and ESC control type, including turning on BD shot or bidirectional D shot. We did flash to BlueJ and we did that as well. Okay. Now we're going to do some arm disarm and switches and things like that, which will kind of wrap this up for at least this part of the assignment. So back in Betaflight, we're going to go over to the modes. Let's see, modes tab here on the side. And what this is to help you set up modes on your transmitter as well as your drone. So when you flip a switch on your transmitter, your drone does something that you wanted it to do. Okay. If you are unfamiliar with how to set up switches on your transmitter, then you will, this might be a little bit of a learning for you, but if you already know how to do it, it'll be a bit of a refresher. I'm going to go through it fairly quickly. Okay. If you have a different transmitter than me, then you will of course need to figure out how to do that on your transmitter. I'm happy to help you with that, but you want to just make sure you get this set up. Okay. So on an EdgeTX transmitter, I'm going to turn it this way so we can see. There we go. Okay. Betaflight. On EdgeTX transmitter, you're going to go in your model that's currently bound to the drone. Okay. Go into model page. We're going to page over until we get to mixes. And we're going to add channels here. We have 1 through 4 already, our main 4 controls on the sticks. We want to set switches and things like that to control our aircraft, arm, disarm, maybe go into different flight modes, things like that. At a minimum, I have a couple things I want you guys to set up, and those are the following. So we're going to go down to channel 5. Okay, and we're going to set channel 5 source, click on source, and then flip a switch you want to use to arm or disarm your aircraft, or turn on or turn off the motors, basically. With Express LRS, you need to use channel 5 for this, so I'm just going to have everybody use channel 5 for it, and there's no problem there. But I would prefer to use this switch in the back on my left hand for arm and disarm. So you see if that's blinking and I flip the switch, it will select SE. That's the switch that this is on the transmitter. So I can return back, return again. I can name it if I want to name it like ARM or something, and that name will show up in here. So I can remember, oh yeah, 5 was ARM, if I don't want to just remember SE is ARM. So you can do that if you'd like. We want to set up an ARM switch, and we want to set up a flight mode switch. Okay, I'm going to go to channel 6, long press. Okay, we're going to go into source. Okay, and I like to use this switch personally for flight modes. Okay, SC, just the one on my right hand kind of finger there. So we'll go back again now, and we have SE and SC. Okay, so this one will control channel 6, this will control channel 5, and then we have our normal first 4 channels here. Okay, if you want to see that in action on your EdgeTX remote, you can go page over to the channels monitor, and now if I move these around, you see the normal sticks move around. Okay, and channel 5 right here, we're going to flip it. There we go, high and low, and channel 6, middle, high, low, just like that. That's our transmitter side setup. Okay, I'm going to return back to that. So what we're going to do, actually, maybe I'll leave that up. There we go. What we're going to do, make sure you can still see that, is here in the Betaflight window, we're going to set these switches. So arm switch, we need to have an arm switch in order to arm our aircraft. You're going to hit add range, and you can either select auto and just flip the switch on your transmitter physically and have it auto detect what channel it is, or you can set the channel manually. Okay. aux1 is channel 5, aux2 is channel 6, aux3 is channel 7, and so forth. Okay. I'm just going to show you the auto function here. So I'm going to say auto, and then I'm going to flip my switch. And it selected aux1, which is correct because this is channel 5 on my radio. Now you want to move this yellow bar so that when you flip the switch high, it goes into the yellow bar, and when you flip the switch low, it goes out of the yellow bar. So into the yellow bar is high, or turning whatever it is on, in this case arming the aircraft. Flipping it low is this gray area here, it's going to turn it off. If I press save, we'll see this a little bit more in action here. So if I go high, it turns red. Okay. I can't arm it right now because it's plugged into the computer, so it's disabled, but it is recognizing that signal, and if it was not plugged in the computer, I should be able to arm the aircraft. Okay. So there's one thing we're going to set up there. We're also going to use angle mode a little bit this semester, so we're going to set up our mode switch here with angle mode. So I'm going to go again to add a range. I can just leave it on auto, flick my switch, and it detects aux2, which is what that is, channel 6. Okay. I prefer to power up the drone in not an angle. Okay. So I'm going to leave this area over here. My switches are all up, which is my default on position. So when I power the drone up, I'm in acro mode. And then if I want to go into angle mode, I will flip the switch towards me and it will go into angle mode. Okay. There is no acro mode section on here because the default mode, if you don't set up any other modes, is acro. So whenever angle's off, we're in acro. If I save this, we'll again see that when I flip the switch here, it goes high, okay, goes low. I guess it doesn't highlight that as much. I thought it highlighted it just like it highlights the arm, but I guess not. Okay, so we have those two set up, and then we want to go down here to black box. Okay, black box is our logging feature we're going to use this semester. It keeps logs of what the aircraft is doing so we can try to tune it better and analyze how it's flying. Okay. And I need to double check this. I keep forgetting to double check. I don't know if Betaflight logs by default or not. So what I would have you do is put black box on a switch. Okay. That way you can log when you want to and not log when you don't want to. Okay. We only have a limited amount of space that we can save logs to, and it fills up pretty fast. So if you log every single flight, you may run out of space before you do another flight, and that can be just annoying because you have to erase all the logs before you can save a new one. A lot of times in my assignments, I have you save a log and turn it in for the assignment so I can see what you're doing with your flight. So you want to add a range here, and for right now, I'm just going to link it to the same switch as my arming switch. So whenever I arm the aircraft, it will also engage black box. I think that might be Betaflight default behavior, but I'm honestly not sure. I just keep forgetting to look that up. But right now, if I just flip my same arm switch, it will pick it up. Okay. And so I'm going to again move this over here, move it over here. Okay. I'm going to hit save. Excuse me. So now we can go hide unused modes. We should just have these three: arm, angle, and black box. Okay. Angle mode, and then arm and black box move together. Okay. Now, if at some other point you say, well, I want to have a separate switch for black box, that's fine. You go into your transmitter. Let's make sure I can still see this okay. Go into your transmitter menu, and you would go over to mixes, and you'd set another channel, say channel 7, for example, to be controlled by a third switch. I don't know, this one over here, or this one back here, or one of these sliders or something like that. And then you would go into Betaflight and you would change it from aux1 to whatever channel it was. If it was channel 7, it'd be aux3. Okay. So that's our flight modes there. Let's press save. Make sure we save those. All right, if we go back to the setup page, we will see some of these flags over here. I just want to point these out briefly. Okay, so if you're ever having trouble arming your quad, you probably have to plug in the Betaflight and see why it's having trouble. In this case, if I try to arm the aircraft right now, okay, with my arming switch, I keep getting this MSP thing, right? MSP It just means it's plugged into the computer basically. So if you hover over that, probably with a configurator, right? Okay. So this will give you some ideas about what's going on with your drone and the arming. You're trying to arm it, and like, why isn't it arming? Why isn't it arming? That can help understand why it's not arming. Your modes here should be set up if you want to try to arm the aircraft. And you can see here it's disabled because we're plugged into the computer. All right, let's see how we're doing here. Okay, set up arm disarm flight modes, black box on switches. Okay, good. We have that set up. Okay. And we're going to configure and verify the failsafe behavior. That's an important thing before we fly. We already went to the failsafe page, but let's go ahead uh, and basically test the failsafe. Okay. So to test the failsafe, I have to be able to arm the aircraft, which means I need to unplug it from the computer. So let's go ahead and return this. And let me adjust this in here real quick. Okay, so I'm going to rotate this. There we go. On the fly adjustments. Okay, so I'm going to unplug my simulated aircraft here from the computer. Okay, and we're going to power it up via battery power this time. So it's not powered now. I'm just going to power it up via battery. There's our Star Wars song. Okay, and then we're going to attempt to arm the aircraft. Let's see if it works. So I'm going to flip my arm switch. Motor started to spin. I don't know if you can see the motor spinning there. I'm going to raise the throttle a little bit. Okay, throttle's on. I'm going to turn my transmitter off. This is to check failsafe. Failsafe is what's going to happen when we lose link to the transmitter. There we go. Motor stopped by itself. The aircraft's starting to beep. Okay. I don't know if you can hear the beeping, but the motor stopped. So if the aircraft had been in the air, it would have just, fallen on the ground basically. And it's going to start beeping like that because we set up the beacon. So it's going to keep beeping like that because it's lost connection between the receiver and the transmitter since I turned it off. So our failsafe's working correctly. All right, let's turn the transmitter back on. Okay. There we go. And now the beeping stopped. We have regained a link to our transmitter here. All right. So let's go through some final checks. I'm going to turn the display capture back on here. Oops. Sorry about that. Okay. Let's go over to Betaflight. So we're going to connect up again to the aircraft, do a few final checks. We know the failsafe's working. We know the receiver's working. I want to check on the VTX one more time. See if we can get it. It still says false. I'm not sure what to do about that. It worked a few minutes ago before I started filming. So we'll have to do some more troubleshoot on that, but you know how to set it up to this point. One other thing we want to turn on is our OSD. Okay, on-screen display. Right now it pretty much has nothing in there. Okay, but what you can do is you want to double check a couple things here. And this seems to vary. I don't know why it varies sometimes. Maybe I'm just doing something wrong. But your video format for analog video cannot be HD. That's for HD systems. So let's go ahead and put it on auto and save that. Okay. We're also going to go over to our presets. And again, this is if you're flying analog. And we're going to type OSD. This UAV Tech analog preset works pretty well for putting all the on-screen items on our goggles, our screen. So I'm going to save that. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second. It gives these warnings. I don't know why it gives so many warnings. Here it's trying to set values that aren't available, I believe. I'm not sure why that's part of its preset. I'll go ahead and save it anyways. That's okay. It's just going to be on-screen elements that maybe aren't working correctly. We can change those later. If we go back to OSD right now, we can see all this stuff that got put on there from his preset. Okay, and the VTX is actually overheating right now, so I got to turn this off for a second. Okay, but these different elements here, we will be changing some of these later in class as well, so you don't worry too much about this. But these are all different items you can move around and place in different spots on the screen, or you can delete them, or change the fonts or things like that. And you can see here these different things are what you can select to put in your OSD whatever you'd like to use. You don't have to use all of them. You don't have to use any of them, but there's a few that I'd recommend you keep. Like I said, we'll talk more about that later in class. But at a minimal level, we want to get something in there so we can make sure when we check in our goggles that it is actually working. So we see something in there. Okay. So once the VTX cools down a little bit, I can power back up. We can test that. Okay. All right. So let's go. Let's go ahead and try it again. We're going to power it back up. Just do a full power up and unplug USB for a second here. Let's see what we get. Let's see if we can see this in here well enough. There you go. See that Betaflight menu stuff there, and then you can see the battery and the items on the top of the screen and the stuff on the bottom of the screen. So you can rearrange things to be to your liking, right? But that is our on-screen display functioning there and giving us information about the aircraft while we're flying around, so we don't fly our batteries too long and damage the batteries or other things like that. All right. Okay, power that down. Hopefully this video helps. It was a bit of a quick recording, so I apologize for any errors or things like that. But I saw some errors being made in class just because people weren't understanding how things were supposed to go, so I thought I'd make this real quick. Let me know if there's anything else I missed, and we'll see you in class. Thanks.